Welcome back to the last and the final session in Discourse and Power. And we stopped last time on the slide exercise instructions. Here are the instructions for your practical exercises. So, let's select a text or transcript for analysis from one of these options. Option 1, a news article about controversial topic, immigration, climate change, political violence, economic policy, anything generating debate, choose article from mainstream news source. Option 2, a transcript of workplace meeting or interview. If you have access to recording or notes from meeting, job interview, performance review, this provides rich material for analysis. Option 3, political speech or campaign materials, petitions, use discourse strategically to persuade, mobilize, frame issues, and campaign speeches, debates, political ads all work well. Option 4, social media posts about a social issue, X threads, Facebook discussions, Instagram posts about Black Lives Matter, Me Too, climate activism, or rather, or other movements show discourse in action. Option 5, an excerpt from a textbook or educational matter, even supposedly neutral educational texts, embedded ideologies and power relations worth examining. Choose something that interests you and is substantive enough to support analysis, at least several paragraphs or conversational of several exchanges, too short and there is insufficient material, too long, and analysis or analysis become unwindly. Analysis framework. Use this framework to structure your analysis. Step 1, identify the concept. Begin with contextualization. Who are the speakers or writers? What are their positions, identities, and institutional affiliations? What is their relationship to each other? Equal status, racial, adversarial. What is the purpose of this communication? Inform, persuade, instructs, entertain. What goal does the speaker or writer have? What institutional or social structures from frame this interaction in this institutional discourse? Medical, legal, educational, corporate, what cultural norms apply? Context shapes everything same. Words mean differently in different contexts, so begin by establishing context clearly. Examine linguistic features. Look for specific discourse markers of power. This is where you apply the analytical tools we've learned. Active versus passive voice. Who is agent? Who is acted upon? Is agency hidden through passive construction? Word choices? What loaded terms appear? What connotations do they carry? What alternatives might have been used? Metaphors. What metaphors frame understanding? What do they imply? Pronouns. We versus they, inclusive versus inclusive. Who is grouped with whom? Turn taken patterns. Who speaks more? Who interrupts? Who must wait? Questions versus statements. Who asks? Who answers? What does this reveal about power? Interruptions. Who interrupts whom? What does this signal about status? Topic control. Who introduces topics? Who gets pursued? Who gets dismissed? By specific quote exact language points to precious features rather than making vague claims. Analyze power relations. Now interpret what you've observed. Who has power in the discourse? How is um, it exercised through topic control, through evaluation, through not to say through framing, through access to speaking. How is power resisted through challenges, through alternative framing, through oppositional readings? What is taken for granted? What assumptions go unquestioned? What is treated as natural or obvious? What ideologies operate invisibly? Whose perspectives are centered or marginalized, whose voices are amplified, whose are silenced or related to periphery. What ideological assumptions are embedded? What belief systems does this discourse neutralize? What alternatives does it make unthinkable? Consider implications. Finally, consider broader implications. What are the social consequences of these discourse patterns? Do they reinforce or challenge inequalities? Whose interacts do they serve? What material effects might they have on people's lives? How might they reinforce or challenge inequalities? Does this discourse naturalize hierarchies or does it challenges them? What alternative discourses are possible? How else might this content communicated? What would different framing accomplish? This framework moves from description, what linguistic features exist, to analysis, what do they mean, to critique what are their social functions and consequences. Guiding questions for your analysis. Let me give you specific guiding questions um, regionalized by analytical focus or language choices. What loaded or value laden terms appear, terms carrying strong positive or negative connotations are their euphemisms, pleasant terms for unpleasant realities, or euphemisms, harsh terms for neutral or positive realities. How are actors represented as agents doing things or as objects have things done to them? What presuppositions are built into the dialogue? What's assumed without argument? What metaphors shape understanding? How do they frame the issue? Power indicators. Who controls topics and transitions? Who introduces new topics? Who shifts conversation when uncomfortable? Whose voices are quoted or cited? Who gets to speak with authority? Whose perspectives are presented? Who asks questions and who answers the questions? Or the questioning role typically signals power. How is knowledge authority established? Through credentials, through situational position, through rhetorical assertion. What voices or perspectives are absent? Who isn't quoted? Whose perspectives aren't represented? What alternative aren't mentioned? Those questions guide your attention to features that reveals power, uh, dynamics. You want to answer all for every text. Focus on what's most relevant for your particular analysis. Now let's move to example analysis, a snippet. Um, Let me give you an example showing what an analysis looks like in practical. Consider this news headline: Protesters disrupt traffic during rush hour. Framing emphasizes negative impact disruption rather than protesters' message or reasons for protesting. This headline foregrounds what protesters do to commuters rather than what they are advocating for. This framers um, or frames protest primarily as inconvenience rather than political expression. Lexical choice disrupt carries negative connotations, causing disorder, interfering with operations, creating problems. Alternative words like demonstrate, rally, or march would be more neutral or positive. Occupy might be neutral, but disrupt frames the protesters negatively from the start. Focus centers inconvinced commuters rather than protesters. Grievances, the headlines perspective is um, commuters struck in traffic, not protesters trying to draw attention to injustice. This choice of perspective shapes how readers understand the event as something that happened to them commuters rather than something protesters are doing for important reasons. Agency protesters are active agents of disruption. They're doing something, and that something is negative, disrupting, but their broader goal remain invisible. We see what they are disrupting, but not what they're fighting for. This makes their action seem arbitrary, purposeless, mercilessly troublesome rather than politically meaningful. Implications frames protest as problems behavior rather than legitimate political expression. The headline doesn't present protest as protected constitutional right as citizens, exercising free speech as people drawing attention to justice or to injustice. It presents protests as disruption, as problem requiring management or suppression. Yeah. This framing likely decreases public sympathy for protesters and their cause while increasing support for police intervention or laws restricting protest. If you understand protests primarily as distributions of your commute, you're unlikely to support them to consider seriously what they're advocating. Discussion prompts, but before this, we have to say that alternative framing, uh, protesters demand justice, temporarily block traffic, or demonstrating highlights issue X would frame the same event, even every differently, foregrounding political purpose rather than inconvenience. This example shows what discourse analysis looks like, identifying specific linguistic features, explaining their effects, considering alternatives, examining social implications. Discourse prompts. After completing your analysis, discuss with peers what patterns did you notice and how powerful operates through languages. Share observations. Did you notice similar patterns in different texts? What linguistic features the most consistently signal power? What surprised you? How might Different audiences interpret this text differently. Remember Stuart Hall's encoding decoding model. Dominant audiences might accept intended meanings, but marginalized audiences might read oppositionally. How might someone from different social position understand this text? What discourse practices reinforce social inequalities? Connect specific linguistic features to broader social structures. How do these discourse patterns maintain hierarchies, neutralize inequality, silence alternatives? How could the communication be restricted to distribute power more equitably? This is crucial, not just critical, but imagination of alternatives. How might this content be communicated in ways that do not reproduce inequality? What would more democratic discourse look like? What insights does this analysis provide for you, your own communication protesters or practices? Make it personal, how well you communicate differently. Having done this analysis, what patterns will you avoid? What alternatives will you pursue? This exercise demonstrates that critical discourse analysis is not merely theoretical, it's a practical skill for navigating and changing power relations in everyday life. By developing this ethical capacity, you become a more conscious and strategic communicator, able to recognize and respond to power dynamics others might miss. Summary of key concepts. As we conclude our exploration of discourse and the power, let's synthesize the essential concepts that form the foundation of critical discourse awareness. These interconnected ideas provided a framework for understanding how language shapes and is shaped by social relations. Discourse constructs reality. Language doesn't just describe the world, it actively creates social meanings, identities, and the power relations. Language enables resistance. Discourse is not only a tool of control, but also a means for marginalized groups to challenge power and assist or assert agency. Critical awareness empowers recognizing discourse patterns, enables social critic resistance, and the more conscious communication. Power is relational. Power circulates through interactions operating in every conversation and relationship, not just imposed topic or top down. Ideology shapes language. Underlying belief systems are embedded in seemingly neutral or choices, making assumptions appear neutral or natural. Discourse reproduces inequality. Language practices systematically advantage dominant groups while marginalizing alternative perspectives. Core principles to remember: power is diffuse and multi-directional. It doesn't flow simply from powerful to powerless, but circulates through all social interactions, operating both repressively and productively. Language is never neutral. Every linguistic choice carries ideological weight and positions speakers within social hierarchies and relationships. Context matters profoundly. The same words or structures can have entirely different meanings and effects depending on who speaks to whom, when, where, and for what purpose. Mm. Practical applications. Understanding discourse and power is not merely an academic exercise, it has immediate practical relevance. Personal communication. Recognize power dynamics in your daily interactions. Be conscious of how your language choices position yourself and others. Practical, equitable communication patterns. Media literacy, critical, evaluate news, advertising, and social media for embedded ideologies and the power relations, question framing choices, and missing perspectives. Social engagement participants more effectively in civic discourse, challenge oppressive language patterns, support marginalized voices, and alternative narratives. By integrating these concepts into your worldview, you develop critical discourse competence, the ability to recognize, analyze, and strategically navigate power relations and language use. This competence is essential for active citizenship, professional success, and ethical communication in our complex, diverse society. Relation and discussion questions. Relation deepens learning by connecting abstract concepts to personal experience. Take time to consider these questions individually, then discuss with peers to gain multiple perspectives. There are no single correct answers. These questions invite ongoing exploration and critical thinking. Power in everyday conventions. How does power influence your everyday conventions? Think about recent interactions with professors, employers, family members, friends, service workers. Where did you hold power? Where were you relatively powerless? How did these dynamics shape what you said and how you said it? Consider specific linguistic choices. Did you use formal or casual language, direct or indirect requests? How much space did you take in the conversation? Did you feel free to disagree or challenge what would have happened if you communicated differently? The question of neutrality. Can language ever be truly neutral? Why or why not? This fundamental question strikes at the heart of discourse theory. Consider even supposedly effective language, objective language in science or journalism involve choices about what to include, how to frame, which sources to cite. Grammar itself embeds power relations, active versus passive voice, generic he, standard versus non-standard varieties. The impossibility of neutral language doesn't mean anything goes. Some discourses are more inclusive, accurate, or equitable than others. If language cannot be neutral, what standards should guide our communication choices? Responsibility in discourse. What responsibilities do speakers have in exercising power through discourse? As a speaker, you inevitably exercise power through language choices. This raises ethical questions. Should you adapt your communication style to accommodate others, or is that inauthentic? What obligations do you have to use inclusive language? When should you speak up versus remain silent? How can you use your voice to amplify marginalized perspectives? Practical applications, improve social interactions. How can understanding discourse and the power improves social interactions? Discuss specific strategies for more equitable communication in your relationships, in classes and workplace. Personal growth. What aspects of discourse and the power do you find the most challenging to recognize in your own behavior? How might you develop greater self-awareness, creating a change? Where do you see opportunities to challenge oppressive discourse patterns in your communities? What risks and benefits would this involve? Further reading and resources. Deepen your understanding of the discourse and the power with these fundamental texts and resources. This curated list provides entry points into various aspects of critical discourse analysis, power theory, and applied linguistics. Essential box. Michael Foucault. Power knowledge, selected interviews and other writings, foundational text introducing Foucault's revolutionary concepts of power as the diffuse, relational, and productive rather than purely repressive. Essential reading for understanding how power circulates through discourse and produces knowledge. Stephen D. Brookfield discussion as a way of teaching tools and the techniques for dramatic and democratic classrooms. A practical guide examining power dynamics in classroom discussions offers concrete strategies for facilitating democratic dialogue while acknowledging inherent power asymmetries between teachers and students. Norman Fairclough, Critical Discourse Analysis, the Critical Study of Language, Comprehensive Introduction to CDA Methodology and Theory, provides the frameworks for analyzing how discourse reduces power relations and social inequalities through linguistic features. Additional recommended reading, Theory and the Foundations, Toon, A. Van Dyke, Discourse and Power, Ruth Wallach, Michael Mayer, Methods of Critical Discourse Analysis, James Paul Gee, An Introduction to Discourse Analysis, Pierre Bourdieu, Language and Symbolic Power Applications and Case Studies, Deborah Cameron, Working with Spoken Discourse, Bill Hawkes, Teaching to Transgress, Jonathan Potter, Margaret Witherell, Discourse and Social Psychology, Stewart Hall, Representation, Cultural Representations and Significance Praxis. Online resources and tools, video lectures and courses, Coursera, for example, Language, Power and Culture by University of London, YouTube, Noam Chomsky lectures on language and policies, TED Talks, search for language and power, critical thinking, media literacy, academic websites, critical discourse analysis research, group resources, Discourse Society, the journal, Sage publications, language and power, Waki and databases, analysis tools, media bias chart and fact checking websites, all size media bias fact check, corpus linguistics, tools for analyzing language patterns, rhetorical analysis, frameworks, and templates. Journals and periodicals stay current with ongoing researching in discourse analysis, discourse anxiety, interdisciplinary journal on discourse and social issues, critical discourse studies dedicated to CDA theory and practice, text and talk covers conversations, analysis, and discourse studies, Journal of Language and Politics for Political Discourse and Ideology, building your library. Start with one foundational text, Foucault or Fairclough. Then explore applications in your areas of interest, education, media, politics, healthcare, etc. Many academic libraries provide access to journals, follow scholars on social media for current discussions and resources. Conclusion, empowering through awareness. We've journeyed through the intricate landscape where language and power intersect, exploring how discourse shapes social realities and how power circulates through our everyday communication. This knowledge is not merely academic, it is profoundly practical and potentially transformative. Recognition at the first step, recognizing power in discourse is the first step toward challenging inequality. When you can identify how language obscures agency, neutralizes hierarchies, marginalizes voices, or reproduces stereotypes, you gain the ability to resist these patterns. Critical awareness transforms you from an unconscious participant in oppression. Uh, Oppressive discourse practice into a conscious agent who can make strategic choices about communication or about communication. Awareness, recognizing power dynamics in language use, analysis, yeah. Understanding how discourse patterns operate, critical thinking, questioning neutralized assumptions and ideologies, strategic action, using language consciously to challenge injustice, social change, contributing to more equitable discourse communities. Students, as active participants, you are not passive recipients of discourse, you are active participants who can reshape power dynamics through language. Every conversation, every text you write, every discussion you join is an opportunity to practice more equitable communication. You can challenge exclusionary language and advocate for inclusive alternatives, amplify marginalized voices by sharing platforms and citing diverse sources, question dominant narratives in the media, textbooks, and everyday conversations, create spaces for democratic dialogue in your communities. Use your relative privilege to interpret oppressive discourse when you witness it. Practice reflexivity about your own positionality and discourse practice, build calculations across differences through respectful, inclusive communication, develop critical media literacy, and help others to do the same. Encouragement for application as you move forward, carry critical discourse perspectives into your academic work and everyday life. When you read news articles, ask whose perspective is centered, what's taken for granted. When you participate in discussions, notice who speaks most, whose ideas get developed, when you write or speak, consider who am I positioning myself and others? What alternatives exist? The limits of any language means the limits of my world, as Ludwig Wittgenstein said. By expanding your critical awareness of language, you expand your world, your capacity to understand questions and shape social reality. This is empowerment and its truest sense, the ability to recognize and challenge the forces that constrain human potential while building more just and equitable ways of being together. Glossary of key terms, disclosure, structured language use within specific social contexts that constructs meaning, identities, and power relations. Discourse encompasses both texts and talk, operating at multiple levels, from individual conversations to language scale, societal narratives, power, the capacity to influence or control others, actions, beliefs, or communities. In discourse analysis, power is understood as relational, diffuse, and circulating through social interaction rather than possessed by individuals. Power operates both expressively constraining and productively enabling ideology systematic of beliefs, values, and assumptions that shape how we understand the world and our place in it. Ideologies are often naturalized through discourse, making particular worldviews seem common sense or inevitable rather than constructed and contestable. Critical discourse analysis, CDA, an interdisciplinary approach to studying language that reveals how power, relations, ideologies, and social inequalities are reduced or challenged through discourse. CDA examines linguistic features to uncover implicit meanings and social functions. Hegemony, dominance achieved through contest or consent rather than force, where subordinate groups accept their position as natural or inevitable. Hegemonic discourse maintains power structures by making them appear legitimate and unavoidable. Resistance, actions, discourses, and practices that challenge or oppose dominant power structures in discourse analysis. Resistance involves creating alternative narratives, reclaiming stigmatized language, or disrupting established communication patterns. Gatekeeping processes by which institutional representatives control access to resources, opportunities, or services through language-based assessment. Gatekeeping can systematically disadvantage those from non-dominant linguistic or cultural backgrounds. Nominalization, the grammatical process of turning verbs or adjectives into nouns, for example, decide, converts to a decision. Normalization obscures agency and responsibility by removing human actors from view, making processes appear as things that simply happen. Turn taking, the organization of speaking turns in conversation includes or including who's speaking, when, for how long, and how transitions between speakers occur. Turn-taking patterns reveal power dynamics, as dominant speakers typically take longer turns and control traditions. Rhetorical devices, linguistic techniques used to persuade, emphasize, or create particular effects, including metaphor, repetition, contrast, rhetorical questions, and appeal to emotion or authority. These devices shape how audiences understand and respond to discourse. Additional concepts, presupposition, assumptions built into language that are taken for granted rather than explicitly stated. When did you stop cheating presupposes you were cheating, framing the way information is presented that influences interpretation, emphasizing certain aspects while de-emphasizing or excluding others. Intertextuality, how texts reference respond to, incorporate other texts, creating webs or meaning across discourses, modality, linguistic expression or certainty, possibility, obligation, or permission that reveal speaker's stance and authority, must versus might. Code switching, alternating between different languages, dialects, or registers, depending on context, often reflecting identity, negotiation, and power dynamics. A standard language is the language variety that is socially privileged and used in formal institutions, often associated with educated dominant groups. These concepts provide a vocabulary for analyzing and discussing the discourse and the power as you apply them. Remember that they are analytical tools, not rigid categories. Language is complex, creative, and constantly evolving. Use these terms to sharpen your observations while remaining open to the nuances, context depending nature of communication, digital contexts. Thank you. And the final words. This brings us to the end of our comprehensive exploration of this course and power. Over these 3 hours, we've journeyed from foundational concepts through analytical frameworks to practical application. We've examined how power operates in discourse, how discourse constructs reality, how language both constrains and liberates. You now have sophisticated tools for analyzing how power works through language in everyday interactions, in institutional settings, media discourse, and cross-cultural communication. You understand the major concepts, focals, reconceptualization of power, critical discourse, analysis, methodology, gatekeeping, naturalization, the dual natural of power. You've learned practical analytical skills, how to identify linguistic markers of power, how to analyze text critically, how to recognize ideologies embedded in seemingly neutral language, how to imagine and create more equitable discourse alternatives. But more than specific knowledge and skills, you've developed critical consciousness, a way of experiencing language that recognizes its power dimension, that questions what seemed natural, that seems possibilities for transformation. This is not an ending, it's beginning. Discourse and the power analysis is not something you master once and for all. It's ongoing practice, continuously developing as you encounter new contexts, new challenges, new possibilities. Continue practicing these analytical skills, apply them to media you consume, conversations you have, texts you write, develop your critical consciousness, further use your growing awareness ethically and strategically. You have power to shape discourse in your communities, to challenge oppressive patterns, to create more democratic communication spaces, to contribute to social justice through conscious strategic language use. Language is power. Understanding how language works gives you power. Use it wisely. Use it ethically, use it for justice. Thank you for your engagement, your curiosity, your commitment to understanding how discourse and the power shape our worlds and how we might reshape them toward greater justice and equity. The conversation continues. Your voice matters. Your critical awareness makes a difference. Thank you so much again, and see you next lecture, inshallah. Until next time, tata for now.